All right, thanks so much everybody for joining us today for Antenna's Q3 State of Subscriptions webinar. We're going to be focused this time on the role of non-premium services in the overall streaming landscape. For those who might be new to Antenna, just a bit of background on what we do. So we are a data and analytics company for the subscription economy. We have a panel of about 2 million Americans for whom we study their financial transactions to understand what they're signing up for and canceling. We extrapolate that out to count the number of subscribers to all these services. And then, as you'll see today, we do very detailed analytics on acquisition and churn for all these services. So let's kick off with introductions. I am Jonathan Carson, co-founder and CEO of Antenna, and joined today by Brooke Kilker, our manager of Insights, and Brendan Brady, our director of strategy. All right, so I'll kick off with just a little bit of context setting here, and then we'll dive deep. So it is an interesting time in media in general. For years, we've been talking about a march to a supposedly inevitable consolidation in the sector. But if we actually look at what's happening in the marketplace, virtually every industry move over the past few quarters has gone in the other direction. So NBCU and WBD have announced they're doing splits or spinning off subsidiaries. Paramount's new ownership is really aggressively asserting itself as a strong and independent standalone player. And right now, this fall, we're in the midst of some major new streaming service launches, which is really exciting. Obviously, ESPN and Fox One have just launched. Roku's Howdy, CNN Access. So lots taking place that we could almost term an unconsolidation. And we think that what's happening in the marketplace is really a demonstration just of the sophistication and the diversity of tastes of American TV viewers. And that ties into our topic today, which is one of Antenna's favorite topics, specialty SVOD. And so think of this as the long tail of topical services, which they continue to outpace the growth of the overall streaming market. And as those top super services really focus on going big. So they're going big with sports rights, going big with their top IP franchises, focused on, a smaller number of big budget series made with top stars. That really leaves white space around the edges for these focused players that deeply address a particular genre or a particular audience. So that group, these longer tail services, they have been for several years and continue to outpace growth in the overall market. But we are starting to see some maturation in the category, which we're going to talk about today. It's similar to what we probably saw with premium streamers starting in 2023. So growth is still strong, but is decelerating a bit. The flip side to that, the positive news that we'll also talk, is churn is also starting to moderate a bit. Two things that we're going to do special today that we haven't done in the past. Number one, specialty SVOD, we're going to do a deeper dive into to look at some subcategories that we think are an interesting way to look at the market. And then secondly, specialty SVOD is not the only part of the non-streaming world. We are going to also look at two other non-premium categories. We're going to look at sports streamers, and that'll include like multi-sport services like ESPN Plus and DAZN, as well as the league-specific services. And then we're going to take a look at virtual MVPDs like YouTube TV and Sling TV as well. All right, let's get into the data. If we start with the headline numbers, Antenna estimates that the overall U.S. video streaming market for the services that we track is just shy of 350 million total subscriptions in the mid 2025. So 4 in 5 of those subscriptions are the top 9 premium streamers. So the super services still really make up a bulk of the market. That portion of the market grew at about 10% in the past year. We're going to focus today on the other 22%, those non-premium services. So about half of that group are the 24 streamers that we count as specialty streamers. That group grew about 12% in the past year, so outgrew the premium category. The subscribers for our 9 sports services were actually down a little bit last year. Important to note, there was healthy growth across most of those sports streamers other than ESPN Plus. And ESPN Plus, I think we have to put a little asterisk next to for this time period because it is essentially going through very much change with the launch of the broader ESPN streaming service. ESPN Plus is rebranded and essentially becomes like a new plan type within that broader super service. And in the lead up to that, Disney's really been heavily pushing the duo bundle of Hulu and Disney Plus instead of the trio bundle, which had also included ESPN Plus. So that's what was going on there. Now for VMVPD, the 5 services that we track in that category were up 5% year over year. And we're going to talk more about them later as well, because they are also going through an interesting time of change. Number one, football season is obviously kicking off. Literally, the NFL is kicking off tonight. And that's always a big moment for virtual MVPDs. But in addition to that, with the launch of the ESPN and Fox streamers, that's a real change for the pay TV category in general, because that represents the last kind of bastion of what was linear-only programming that is now fully available to cord cutters as well. So we'll see with interest what happens with that category in the next couple of months. Okay, so let's click into the growth with much more to mention. And to do that, I'm going to pass it over to Brendan.
Thank you, Jonathan. So what we're seeing is that non-premium streaming continues to gain share. And what we mean by that is really evidenced on this chart. So if we look at the gray bars here, what's being measured there is total unique SVOD consumers. You can think about this as unique individuals who have effectively made a gross ad to an SVOD, right? They have made a paid purchase decision with a given SVOD. Now, in the lines where we have on the legend, for example, percent transacted with specialty, that is the proportion of those total unique SVOD consumers who have effectively made one or more of those gross ads or paid purchase decisions within a specialty SVOD service or a sports service or a VMVPD service. And so here we're really looking at kind of the consumer penetration into, or rather the category penetration into the total consumer base. And what we find is quite interesting. If we just focus on the gray bar, we now measure 177 million unique SVOD consumers. That's up 20% from 2023. And then, for example, if we click in on the percent that has transacted with specialty population, we now measure that at 56 million unique consumers, and that's up 68% from 2023. And so we continue to see kind of this, the amount of users moving into these other subcategories is outpacing the growth of the total pie. And so we wanted to click in on who specifically are these new users coming in and kind of what does that look like in any given quarter. And so here we are looking at the number of users who have effectively entered the category or found the category by making one or more of those paid purchase decisions across specialty, sports, and VMVPD across a variety of quarters. And what we found is that over the past 10 quarters, it's been 38.5 million new consumers kind of finding the category. And so that averages out to about just shy of 4 million new consumers entering one of these categories in any given quarter. Now, I would call out, if we just look kind of at the volume of first half 25, so both Q1 and Q2, it is down slightly from that of Q1 and that of 2024 as well as 2023. That being said, over the past 10 quarters, it has been 3.8 million new consumers entering these categories. And of course, bringing people in is just kind of half of that puzzle, right? loyalty is core to all analytics that Antenna does, and so we'd be remiss not to click in on the loyalty profiles associated with these categories of video. And so what we see is that, sure, the subscriber pie is still growing. That pace has moderated a little bit. And as this category has matured, we have seen a bit of a moderation in churn across all of these subgroups. And so if we just look at premium SVOD right now, we measure that at weighted average churn at 4.1%. That's the best out of these 4 subcategories. Now, I would say that premium SVOD weighted churn rate, of course, benefits greatly from long tenured Netflix users who can help kind of weigh down that average. If we look at specialty, that's going to churn between 6 and 8% in any given month. For sports, that's between 4 and 12%. And for VMVPD, it's between 4 and 7%. And as Jonathan kind of teased at the top of this call, we thought it would be a nice time to kind of reconsider potential groupings of the specialty category to enable us to kind of analyze them with more granularity. And so on the left-hand side, we have kind of our regular groupings. So we have premium SVOD. These are the biggest players. We have the virtual MVPDs. We have the sports services. And then we have these 27 specialty SVOD services. And we thought hard of how could we group these into subcategories. And here's what we came up with on that yellow table to the right. So we have premium scripted. These are those hit-driven services such as an AMC Plus or an MGM Plus. Then we have news and unscripted. These are these factual, mostly unscripted services. We have special interest British for any Anglophiles in your life. We have special interest kids and family, some of that feel-good, appropriate for everyone in the household type of programming. And then lastly, we have special interest other. And in more cases than not, these are services targeting a specific demographic or targeting a specific category of programming. And so with those groups established, we can begin to look at the market through this lens. And so here we're looking at subgrowth and the accompanying share shift from Q1 23 to Q2 25 across these subcategories. What we found is that the total pie grew 6% year on year in Q2 25. Now, maybe more telling than that is really just looking at this chart in total and just noticing that each service or each groupings of services seems to grow fairly consistently. And there is a very healthy and diverse kind of mix across these subcategories. And that was really the main finding for us as this pie continues to grow when we look at the share of subscriptions by category. And so we just looked from 2023 to 2025. If we just zoom in on Q2 25 and compare it year over year to Q2 24, what we found is that kids and family, that subgrouping of specialty SVOD, was the fastest growing from a subscription standpoint. Now, I would mention that in July of 2024, what was Hallmark Movies Now had issued a rebrand to become Hallmark Plus, and of course did some other stuff alongside of that, and that was a primary driver of some of that kids and family growth that we saw. In addition to kids and family, British, premium SVOD, as well as special interest other, those groupings of services were able to muster up double-digit year-on-year growth in Q2 25 as well. So that's subscriptions, and oftentimes we'll pair cuts of subscription data with the acquisition data or the signups data. And that's what we're looking at here, and we believe this can be a signal of how that subscription share may shift or not over time. And so here we're just looking at the signups on the equivalent quarters coming in. So this is the top of the funnel. And really, no matter how you cut this up, a big finding is that there are a lot of signups up for grabs in any given quarter, between 20 and 30 million across this collection of services. And then I would say, the shares vary, but there are certainly some areas where we see some seasonality. If you notice Q3 with sports services, that's what we're living in right now. So when we publish that data going forward, we will probably see an outperformance from the sports category alongside the NFL as well as college football returning. We also see that in VMVPD. And then the other thing I would call out is some of these services, these general entertainment services that feature mostly scripted programming, you tend to see them kind of gain share in those Q4 periods. This coincides, of course, with holidays and gift giving, but perhaps more notably around Black Friday promotions, which are quite prevalent in the SVOD space. And so similar to how we did subs, we looked 2023 to 2025 for signups. Now here we're just zooming in on the Q2'25 signup totals across these subgroups and comparing that to the Q2'24 equivalent totals. And what we found is that British, special interest British, that subgrouping of SVOD saw the greatest increase in acquisition year on year. Total signups were up 42%. And we believe this was interesting and comes at an interesting time, as just recently BritBox announced a price increase that will be going into effect. That, of course, can have impacts not only on the monetization and economics of a given business, but of course also on the acquisition profile as well as the loyalty profile. And so going forward, cognizant of that price change, we'll be super curious to continue to measure BritBox specifically. And with that, Brooke, I'll pass it to you to get into some of these churn dynamics.
Thanks, Brendan. As we've discussed with subscriptions and signups, performance can vary significantly across our app categories, and churn rate is no exception. This slide shows monthly churn rates by category from 2023 to date, and there are 3 key trends we want to call out on this graph. First, you'll notice since early 2025, churn rates are starting to decline across all categories. This is great news for retention and also a shift from the really volatile rates we saw when streaming was newer in 2022, really showing that streaming is finally starting to mature across not just premium, but also specialty. Second, some services like VMVPD and sports show really clear seasonal patterns. They both follow the NFL season, swinging from 4% all the way up to 12% right after the season ends, and this is predictable year after year. You can also see another spike in December, and this is happening right after Black Friday related promotions, where there's an influx of subscribers, also causing an influx in churn rate. Finally, you'll notice that there are 2 dotted lines on this graph, which represent the average of the service's overarching categories, premium and specialty. And these are really good to use as benchmarks. With this, we can see that several categories actually outperform the category benchmark. British content, kids and family, and news and unscripted maintain lower churn rates than the specialty average, whereas premium scripted, even though it's our largest category, runs much higher than average compared to the specialty benchmark. Moving on to demographics, the next 3 slides will be laid out the same way, showing the general population on the left-hand side, which is defined as the total US adult population with internet, compared to our categories and then our specialty subcategories. When breaking this analysis out by age, we discovered that premium aligns really closely to the general population, but then our specialty subcategories show and reveal much more differences in age. British content really stands out as a good example here. It skews much older, 18 more points in the 55 plus crowd, whereas on the flip side, our special interest other category skews much younger, over-indexing by 2 points in the 18 to 24 age group. Now taking a look at ethnicity, we start to see a similar trend. Now, premium and sports align closely with the general population, and our specialty subcategories once again show differences in trends. I keep on picking on British content, but it's really because it's a great example that's so clear. In this case, it skews towards the white ethnicity group about 13 points higher than our general population, whereas we have other categories like our special interest other category, which skews much more diverse, over indexing by 19 points on Black and Hispanic households. And as a reminder, these services this category includes services such as BET Plus, Crunchyroll, and VIX Premium. So this is what we'd expect to see, but it's still interesting to see the ethnicity variations. Finally, our last demographic slide is on household income, and income distribution shows similar trends as before, where premium mirrors the general population. But now we see sports and VMPPD skew more affluent, which makes sense given their higher subscription costs. Among the specialty subcategories, the main callouts are once again British content, which skews 3 points higher in the 200K household income group, and both special interest other and premium scripted over-index in the under 50,000 household income segment. Now I'll hand it over to Jonathan to discuss total market sizing within our categories.
Thanks, Brooke. So we're going to close out with what we think is a pretty interesting and unique way to think about category size for some of these subcategories. One of the questions we hear most often from our specialty streaming clients is how big can I get? And they're essentially trying to figure out their total addressable market, their TAM. We think that this framework that we're going to talk through now is an interesting way to think about TAM. So we're going to start with the premium scripted subcategory. So this is our category, which includes AMC Plus, Cinemax, MGM Plus, and Stars. And essentially, if we look at the chart on the left, we can see the total number of people who have ever subscribed to one of those four services. And so Antenna's estimate for that number is 45 million, which is up from about 25 million in January of 2023. So that extrapolates out to a compound annual growth rate, or a CAGR, of about 28%. And you can also see from the shape of that gray surface area, there's really no signs of slowing down yet. It seems to be continually growing at that pace. So the shaded portion of the chart then shows the portion of those individuals, those 45 million, who are currently subscribed to one of the four services. And we estimate that number is just shy of 20 million. That's up from about 12 million in 2023. So the CAGR there is 13%. Now, if we look at the right-hand side, we can see Stars is the biggest player of the bunch. So about 21% of our 45 million scripted subscribers are only subscribed to Stars currently. But when I look at this chart, this overall picture, kind of two things jump out to me as potential challenges for this premium scripted category. So first of all, if we think about the category members, Stars, AMC, MGM, and Cinemax, there has been a lot of bundling between those players. So a lot of bundling deals within this category, and yet only 5% of our total category subscribers are currently subscribed to multiple members of these premium scripted services. So that tells me that bundling has had a limited impact to date. Secondly, 3 in 5 of the people who have ever subscribed to one of these four services are not currently subscribed to any of them. So, the kind of the positive side of the nature of the premium scripted category is that they have this steady drumbeat of hit shows that they can use to promote and drive acquisition. The other side to that coin, which can be a challenge, is that when people sign up to watch a particular show, when they finish that show, they may cancel and then move on to a show on another service. And I think we see that in these numbers. Okay, so now if we look at another subcategory with really different dynamics, we can focus on our British programming category that we've been talking about as a sort of a model subcategory. And so this one includes 3 particular services: BritBox, Acorn TV, and PBS Masterpiece. And a number of things jump out here especially when we juxtapose the performance of the British category versus the premium scripted category. So first of all, it's growing faster. So the total number of people ever subscribed, we have at a 34% CAGR, and then the current subs growing at 18%. And premium scripted growth was great too. But we even see an uptick in the growth more recently within the British category. So it seems to be gaining energy. Secondly, despite the fact that there have not been bundles amongst the members of this category, BritBox, PBS Masterpiece, and Acorn TV they've bundled with others, but not with one another. Despite that fact, they actually have a higher portion of subscribers that are currently subscribed to multiple of the three services, 6%, than Premium Scripted had. They were 5%. But Starz, AMC, MGM, and Cinemax did have bundles amongst themselves, so you would expect a much higher cross-subscription rate. So this indicates a strong category affinity and potential upside in this category if the British services did bundle with one another. Third, half of the people who have ever subscribed to a British service are currently subscribed to at least one of the three. So they also have a lower rate of these lapsed subscribers than Premium Scripted. So big picture, if you put all this together, we think British programming services are a really great example of what a healthy subcategory dynamic can look like. And, we would call it out as a model for others to aspire to. All right, so that brings us to time. And so this is the conclusion of our Q3 2025 State of Subs presentation. Really want to thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned up top, if you are an antenna client, you should have already received your report. If you did not, please reach out to your CSM and they'll be happy to send that through. If you are not an antenna client, we would love to change that. You can reach out to us and learn about all of the extra stuff that comes with the quarterly State of Subscriptions reports. It's as I said, a juicier report, but also all of the underlying data. But there is so much more to learn about, so much more just beyond these quarterly reports. So we'd love to walk you through that. If it's not the right time for you, no problem. You can go to antenna.live and download the public version of this report. That's antenna.live. Thanks again for joining.